2 minutes. That's how long a man had to decide if you'd live with one arm or two arms. No time to think, just a blade, a saw, some form of opium painkillers. There were soldiers waiting in line screaming, hundreds of them. A young surgeon's first time on the field, asking his superior for assistance because it's his first time having to amputate. The superior looks at him and says, "Proceed." On the battlefield, you learn by doing. Full of anxiety, the young surgeon administers morphine and starts a notoriously brutal procedure that was a Civil War standard. Blood pooling underneath the wooden table. This wasn't a slaughterhouse, it was a hospital. And the men doing this cutting, sawing, working 18 hours straight, covered in another man's blood, they weren't monsters at all. They were doctors, underpaid, undersupplied, and whether they knew it or not, about to change medicine forever. Before the war, most of these people were small-town doctors. They treated broken bones, delivered babies, and maybe stitched a farming accidents, one or two. Nothing prepared them for the Civil War and what lied ahead. The mini ball changed everything, a soft lead bullet shaped to expand on impact. It didn't just wound people, it broke people. Bone turned into splinters inside the body. Flesh tore in ways that left surgeons puzzled. And here's the part that's interesting. Many surgeons were working from a 60-year-old textbook written before anyone understood infection, before anyone really understood microbes. Their kit was simple. They had a scalpel to cut skin, a blade called a Catling knife to cut through muscle, and a bone saw. The bone saw earned surgeons a grim nickname on both sides of the Civil War: sawbones. 3 out of every 4 surgeries performed in the war were amputations, nearly 60,000 of them. And the men who performed them were about to be called something far worse than the sawbones nickname that they had. Antietam, September 1862. The bloodiest single day in American history. Over 22,000 casualties, and surgeons on both sides were hopelessly outnumbered. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough anesthesia. There wasn't enough tools. And when the smoke cleared, the newspapers had their villain. They called it butchery. They called surgeons during the Civil War careless, reckless, cruel. Here's what those headlines overlooked: that amputation wasn't cruelty, in a sense. It was the fastest way to stop gangrene from killing a man within days. Speed saved lives. The most practiced surgeons could move through an amputation in just minutes. Not because he didn't care, but because he had hundreds more men waiting in line. And contrary to what you've heard, most of these men weren't biting bullets in agony. Chloroform and ether were used in the vast majority of the surgeries. The screaming soldier myth, mostly Hollywood, was wounded soldiers who were screaming largely because they were waiting in line for treatment. The real horror wasn't the pain during surgery. It was what happened after. The lack of microbiology and understanding of the behavior of germs, instruments went from wound to wound, person to person, without being cleaned. Many historians agree that infection killed more men than bullets ever did. Disease and infection killed roughly 2 out of every 3 men who died in this war. Not combat, but infection, in dirty tents, on dirty tables, with good doctors doing everything that they knew at the time, didn't yet understand what was really killing their patients. And their reward for this, Union soldiers were paid somewhere between the range of $100 to $200, or right below $200 a month, depending on your rank. Confederate surgeons had it worse, paid in Confederate currency that grew more worthless by the month, working with dwindling supplies as the Union blockade choked off medicine from reaching the South at all. This was the bottom, overworked, underpaid, publicly branded as butchers, fighting a war against wounds that their medical books did not prepare them for. But two men, one in blue and one in gray. The first one was Jonathan Letterman. He looked at all the chaos at Antietam and asked the radical question, what if the wounded men didn't have to wait for a surgeon to reach them? What if there was a system to bring the care to them? He built an ambulance corps, a structured plan to pick up the wounded, stabilize them, move them to the surgeons in an organized flow instead of just a stampede of chaos. It was the first real triage system in American military history, and it worked. Across the lines on the other side, Hunter Holmes McGuire became personal physician to Stonewall Jackson, and when Jackson was struck by friendly fire, it was McGuire who made the call to amputate his arm. Jackson died days later, not from the surgery, but from pneumonia that followed. And then there was Mary Edwards Walker. The Army refused to commission her because she was a woman. Women were barred from legally enlisting into the Civil War at that time. So she worked anyway. She was unpaid. She worked in field hospitals no one really wanted, and she treated soldiers that other doctors had written off. She would go on to become one of the only women in American history ever to be awarded the Medal of Honor for her efforts and contributions. Here's what the newspapers never understood. Every innovation born out of this horror didn't disappear when the war ended. Letterman's ambulance became the blueprint for how militaries evacuated the wounded. This layered system was used in World War I, World War II, and every other conflict since then. His triage system sorted the wounded, treating the most critical first, and this model is still used in emergency rooms today. 60,000 amputations created something else no one expected: America's first real prosthetics industry. Companies built to serve returning soldiers became the foundation of modern orthopedic technology. The war also proved undeniably that organized nursing saved lives at scale, a lesson that helped influence the founding of the American Red Cross. And the horror of infection, the thing that killed more men than any bullet. It's the exact crisis that pushed American medicine to finally listen when germ theory arrived years later. The lesson had already been written in blood. Doctors just needed the science to catch up. Civil War surgeons were called butchers. History remembers the carnage, but not the development behind the scenes. The men who turned the worst battlefield medicine in American history into the foundation of modern medicine, and it still lives today. History remembers those who act. Until next time, see you in the next video.